on a personal level, it's clear that psychedelics increase, people's ability to connect to themselves, the world, other people, and so on. But somehow, like that, because there have been cultures for thousands of years that use psychedelics. The Greeks had psychedelics, etc.
Yeah, yeah.
Why haven't we really seen an example of them, preventing war? Right? Like, what do you think? Because if you look at the historical record, it's not obvious that there's an impact, or maybe it is in your perspective. But like, I'm curious what you think of that.
Well, I think that war happens either because aggressors come after you or because you need to defend yourself. So there's an incredible book by Aldous Huxley called Island. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
Have you heard of it? So this was the last book that Aldous wrote before he died. And Island is this idyllic society, psychedelics woven through it for rites of passage for when kids are 12 or 13. And it's sort of a psychedelic culture, his sort of utopian psychedelic culture. And it's off on this island. But the book ends with the island being destroyed by the oil companies.
Mm.
So it's like the Avatar movies,
Yeah.
So I think that for psychedelics really to prevent war, it needs to be all the cultures, so that because if and enough of those people. So I guess I'll share this other experience I had with 2 days in a row. This is now also back in 1985, and this was the first day was DMT, and the second day was ketamine, and with a bunch of therapists. So the first day was DMT, and a bunch of us sitting in a circle. These are all therapists and researchers and all. And so during the DMT experience, I had this sense of being blasted beyond my sense of self and part of this enormous universe, and had this feeling of evolution and billions and billions of years, and then I'm a part of everything, and everything is part of me, and this is glorious, wonderful thing. And then I have this thought. It's like reality check. The thought is, if you're part of everything and everything is part of you, then Hitler is part of you too. It's not that he's out there. And that was just this shocking kind of a thing. And it took me a whole day of just being sobered up and quiet and thinking about what that really meant, to say that that's part of all of us, that potential. Not necessarily what we actualize, but that's our potential. Jung has said that we need to study psychology because we know far too little of humans. And he said we are our own, the only natural enemy that we have now is humans. And he said we are the source of all coming evil.
Mm-hmm.
This was Jung just a few years before he died. So I have this sense of, okay, we've got this potential for evil in us, and I kind of accepted that. Then the next day was ketamine. And so during this experience of ketamine, I'm hovering above and behind Hitler as he's giving one of these speeches, like the Nuremberg, just masses of Germans. And I just got really, really scared. And I'm thinking, how do I get into his head? How do I make it so that, he doesn't want to kill people. He doesn't want to be a war leader. And I felt that if I couldn't overcome my fear of looking at him in this moment, that I'd never be able to come to an answer. And luckily with ketamine, I remembered, okay, you can breathe. So I just started breathing, and that helped me control the fear. And then I was able to get back and look more closely. And what was happening was that I saw this Heil Hitler salute. Not that different from what Elon Musk did. But it was like the one pushing the energy out to the many. And then they would do the Heil Hitler salute back to him. Then he would do it back to them. And it would be like this sing-song kind of thing. But it was like this vibration connection that kept getting higher and higher and higher. And Hitler was a master of helping people feel part of something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But it was through this. And then I finally realized that there was no way for me to get inside Hitler's head, that he was getting too much out of it. But it was the people that really were giving away their power was where the solution could be. So what that means is both mainstreaming psychedelics, drug policy reform, So you need a spiritualized humanity. You need mass mental health. So it goes beyond just having, quote, enlightened leaders. There'll always be despots that will manipulate people on the basis of fears and anxieties and hating others and scapegoating. So I guess to your question, why haven't we had a psychedelic informed culture that ended war? But let's go talk about, in a sense, democracy is another way to handle conflict without war.
Mm-hmm.
That's the goal of democracy, is how do we handle conflict? And democracy began by the Greeks in a psychedelically infused culture with the Eleusinian Mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
And that lasted for 2,000 years. It was so important, this kind of experience that you would have of
The Eleusinian Mysteries are 2000 had a 2,000 year.
from 1600 BC, and it was ended around 396.
Oh, okay.
And it was ended by the Catholic Church. And churches are both supposedly about spirituality and good work, but they're also about power. And one of the ways that churches keep power is become the intermediary between you and your own spirituality. So this kind of direct experience that you get from drinking this potion called Kikion, that you were
and this was like an ergot LSD, like.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever reproduced this in the modern day and drank it? Like, do we have the recipe?
No, the recipe is lost. You were forbidden under pain of death to say what happened.
Okay.
So
Wow.
modern scholars have come to this because it's focused on barley and wheat and rye, and ergot grows on rye, and you can get precursors for LSD from that. So there is a lot of effort to try to find that. But I would say that the Greeks felt that this kind of experience was so important that they were willing to let women and slaves participate. It wasn't just the men. Even slaves could participate in these mysteries. And so out of that psychedelic culture came democracy and early philosophy. What happened after the Catholic Church wiped out the Eleusinian Mysteries is this continued power struggle against direct experience. So you have all the burning of the witches in the Middle Ages. The witches were often ones that women worked with plant medicines, sometimes psychedelics, sometimes not. When the conquistadors come to the New World, the first people they felt that they needed to kill were the shamans, because they were the heart of the cultures a lot of times. And so, they criminalized peyote and mushrooms, and those give you visions of the devil, things like that. So I would say that we haven't really had a chance as humanity to have this kind of widespread psychedelic experience that you can get in other ways than just psychedelics, but this sense of how we're all in it together. And so I think now, in the midst of the darkness that we're facing, there's a lot of hope because, the upside of COVID, well, we're all interconnected. You can have a virus from halfway across the world, but it can come here. Global warming is not something that you can have a town, Belmont, pass a law. It's a global problem. Yeah. Nuclear weapons are a global problem. So I think more and more we're realizing that we need to think globally. And I'd say the big consciousness shift that will hopefully prevent war one day is this shift that many people understand in psychology courses in high school or college. You study Abraham Maslow and the hierarchy of needs.
Self-actualization.
Yeah. So that's what you just said. So self-actualization is what people are taught in schools. That it's your survival needs, your belonging needs, your self-esteem needs, and then eventually self-actualization. You become your full self. What people don't know, and this is what's been disturbing to me, is that in the last few years of his life, Maslow changed the hierarchy of needs in confrontation with Stan Grof and LSD research and others. So Maslow started humanistic psychology, but he also started what he called transpersonal psychology. So transpersonal is beyond the person. So it's confrontation with death, with birth, with meaning and purpose, things like that. And so in the last few years of his life, Maslow changed it. So there's something above self-actualization, which is self-transcendence.
Hmm.
meaning to realize that while we are a self bounded within life, birth, and death, we are part of something much, much bigger, and we need to transcend ourselves. It doesn't mean ignoring yourself, sense of self, but think in a more like we're an ant in an anthill kind of a thing. And it's both about every individual ant, but it's also about the anthill. And so that's kind of a spiritual shift. And so I think when we talk, we've talked briefly, I'll just say about Elon Musk and going to Mars, that there's a way in which that's an attempt to think in a cosmic spiritual way.
Mm-hmm.
So there, but it's also running away from the idea that we bring our consciousness wherever it goes, travels with us. And so it's not a solution to go to Mars. It's a running away from real problems to go to Mars. As the thought of, oh, that's what everything needs to be done for. And I can, really do horrible things because I'm saving humanity by going to Mars. So I think that it's a way to think spiritually, to think cosmically, but it's still thinking incredibly selfishly and small-mindedly in many ways. So it's almost like spiritual bypassing. So I think that we, as a humanity as a whole, we really need to move to kind of a new general kind of understanding. I had an incredible opportunity to meet the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, a fellow named Robert Mueller. And in 1983, he wrote this book called New Genesis, Shaping a Global Spirituality. And this book was about how the UN was created for conflicts between countries, but really a lot of those conflicts were religious-based conflicts. And we needed a global spirituality, which is not one world religion. But it's more like the Sufis or the Baha'is, these mystical religions where it's not like this prophet is the real prophet, this prophet is not. It's not like there's one right way, but it's this sense that we're part of this bigger picture. And on the cover of his book was the picture of the Earth from space.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this idea here of sort of the political implications of this mystical experience. And so at the time, psychedelic research was shut down in 1983 when I read his book. He didn't say anything about psychedelics. So I wrote to him a letter and I said, would you help bring back psychedelic research? It will help us study this global spirituality. And again, like Stan Groff, this was now 11 years later than I wrote to Stan, he wrote me back also. That started a whole process. So I think humanity needs to do this kind of consciousness shift as a whole. And one of the things I've talked about, we may know, your listeners may know about Bhutan has created a measure called gross national happiness. And that's a way other than gross national product, which is just about economic activity.
Sure.
This is about gross national happiness. And it's interesting. They've got a lot of attention for that, and they've used it in different countries. I think Finland is often one of the most happiest country, I think, because of the social safety net and things. But I think we need a gross national trauma measure that we can apply to the different countries all over the world. And then over the next 50 years, can we reduce the burden of trauma, both what you experience and also multi-intergenerational trauma through epigenetic transmission of trauma settings? There's a researcher, Rachel Yehuda at the Bronx VA, that has done work on Holocaust survivors and their children and identified epigenetic mechanisms by which sort of set points for fear, anxiety,